So there's an apocalypse on. Let's reread The Hunger Games, shall we? Hello, my name's Lena. If you haven't been here before, I read books. Sometimes that's a good choice, sometimes that's a bad choice, but either way, if you subscribe, you'll be able to witness it. For anyone watching in the future, we're currently living through a pandemic, which means that we are all housebound, and many plans have changed, but one plan that hasn't changed is Suzanne Collins' plan to release a Hunger Games prequel on the 19th of May. Now, I read the Hunger Games series, I want to say like 6, 7, 8 years ago. All I remember is I just had a blast. I took away some political vibes, but I don't really remember a lot of it. And with the new one coming out, I kind of want to read it, but I'm worried that I won't understand it if I haven't reread the first 3. So I called up a local bookshop and waited patiently for my trilogy to arrive in the post. What happened to the first copies? I don't know. But I do know it's a good time to invest in the future of bookshops. If you're stuck inside like me, it's the things to look forward to really become magnified. The podium has risen, excitement's a few, and I'm really excited for this prequel. I'm also very nervous, and I will give my honest thoughts on this channel when it comes out. If you don't have time, or nay, have a greater sense of self-preservation than to reread one of the most panic-inducing trilogies of all time during an incredibly tumultuous global time, then no fear, I'm taking you along on the ride. Consider this your stand-in, your plot point pointer, your reminder of how the books end, and along the way, some wanky theories I've come up with about the series. I reread The Hunger Games during lockdown, and here's what happened.
So it's 7 a.m. in the morning, Craig's asleep, and I'm going to begin reading about a dystopian universe. Here she is, in all her glory, me and you, Suzanne. A bit nervous, but we're going to begin. I almost just squealed with glee at hearing about Gale again. I'd actually just even forgotten his name until you read it and then everything comes back. Gale, what a pity, you've done so much for us. And then also, Candace is way more military already than I thought. His line about Prim, her sister's cat, I think he still remembers how I tried to drown him in a bucket when Prim brought him home. But Prim begged so hard and cried even I let him stay. She's already a kind of like ruthless enough character that she's like, yeah, I'd drown a kid. No shade, that district life, but like, I'd forgotten how hardcore she was. You're not hardcore until you live hardcore. Okay, so I already have some race-related questions. I watch Gale as he pulls out his knife. He could be my brother. Straight black hair, olive skin, even the same grey eyes. But we're not related, at least not closely. Most of the families who work the mines resemble one another this way. So how long has this whole district's mess been a thing? Because either it's been more recent than like 400 years, and they actually purposefully segregated people by race, or it's been going on for so long that everybody looks the same because everybody's having sex with everybody. It also kind of implies, and I kind of forgotten this, that like, they're not white. District 12 is not a white district. But then it goes on to say, that's why my mother and Prim and their light hair and blue eyes always look out of place. They are. And it goes on to say that her mum is descended from a merchant class, so higher up than your average District 12 prole. So would that not mean that it would be impossible for Katniss to look exactly like Gale and Gale? I have a lot of questions. None of them I think will be answered, but we can continue. Okay, I will stop interrupting in a second, and I've just remembered that Craig is still asleep. But I'm kind of freaking out. Having a bit of a moment. They're at the reaping and they're telling the story of how the district began, right? He tells the story of Panem, a country that rose up out of the ashes of a place that was called North America. Also, can we include Canada in that? I always thought it was just about the USA, but it's clearly about Canada as well. He lists the disasters, the droughts, the storms, the fires, the encroaching seas that swallowed up so much of the land, the brutal war for what little sustenance remained. Are you telling me that the capital was caused by climate change? Because that changes everything. How much of the land is left? How far in the future is this? I don't remember anything, and it's still not telling me any facts. Am I just seeing climate change everywhere? How is everything about climate change right now?
There's something that I never realised when I was little. Well, it used to please me when I was little, but now I realise it's not cool. Is that whatever starter Pokemon you choose, you know, you get to pick between 3.
Yeah.
They're all boys. Like, it gives you the gender.
Hang on a second.
Like the
Only
Pokemon
boys can be heroes.
Pokemon you find in the wild look are female as well.
You hunt them down.
So while I'm here reading this dystopia, Craig's over here reading... What are you reading, Craig?
1984. Or at least I'm half reading it, half listening to it. Great novel.
And you're just at the bit where Goldstein is going to do the textbook.
Yes.
Good luck! It's literally the worst part of the book. Thought he'd be really nice and just put a textbook in the middle of a fiction book. Cheers, mate. Cheers. So essentially, I've read 135 pages, but the issue is Katniss keeps talking about food. And I understand it's because she is a starving proletariat from District 12, so whenever she gets food, she like describes it in visceral detail. But I'm going to need to eat if I'm going to continue to read this book.
Years I thought the Hunger Games and Game of Thrones was the same thing. I'm not shitting you. I was like, I remember when I think one time I saw both books side by side, I was like, huh, oh yeah.
I'm actually appalled. It's 4 o'clock and I am here. 251 pages, and boy do I have thoughts. I found that the paradoxical issue with filming a video about the Hunger Games is that there are constantly things to talk about, but the way it's written means that you 100%, the last thing you want to do is put the book down and discuss the things. So as I'm sure is the same with many quarantine vlogs, I haven't really been anywhere very visually different, but it feels like I've been in a lot of places in my head. After I cooked breakfast, I read for a little bit longer before this 6'3" lump came and sat in my lap. But as he made me some 10 out of 10 lunch, completely forgiven, I endeavoured to get dressed. And then I've literally just been reading. So here are some of the things I've noticed so far. In general, I'd say it's really, really fucking readable, which sounds like saying food is edible, but you know what I mean. The pacing is on point. What I noticed on the back that wasn't there from the last editions I own, it's always very telling in publishing what quotes a publisher decides to put on the back of the book. And I swear to God, these were not the quotes from my last editions that I used to own, but these two are from Anthony Horowitz and Stephen King, complimenting not that it's a cultural phenomenon or the characters or anything like that, both complimenting the quality of the writing. And I can't help but think, if the book did not feature a teenager as the main character, or maybe if it did because Stephen King wrote Carrie and that's apparently an adult book, and if the book wasn't written by a woman, would it have been published in a completely different way and received by the public in a very different way? Because I think that even though this trilogy is hugely respected by the people who have read it and love it, I feel like in the public consciousness it exists somewhere between City of Bones and Divergent, which isn't necessarily an insult. I tried and couldn't get through the first books of either of those series, but it doesn't mean it's an insult. It just means that I think that this writing could be held up against thrillers by men and compete pretty well. Even the men who write the thrillers agree. I genuinely thought that part of the vlog might be me going, oh, this didn't date well, or like, oh, I remember this differently, or this is a weird sentence, but I haven't found those sentences here. This is a very meticulously written manuscript, and for that I am both jubilated and kind of insulted on the behalf of Suzanne Collins. Anyway, the themes of rebellion come in really early on, which I'm loving. I'd kind of forgotten how explicit the purpose of the Hunger Games is for all the districts in the capital, which is to remind them that resistance is futile. At the beginning, when Katniss volunteers as tribute, I'd forgotten that her whole district are kind of secretly rebelling already. They're encouraged to give a round of applause for their newest tribute, and literally the whole district are like, nah. Contrary to all traditions and customs, nobody claps. I stand there immovably while they take part in the boldest form of dissent they can manage, silence. The racial coding is really interesting. District 11, which is supposed to be above District 12, where Katniss is from in ranking, is the agriculture district, which is where Prue is from. She is one of only 2 black contestants, I think. As the book goes on, we realise that Rue talks about singing in the fields. There's lots of slavery motifs. It's also just so glaringly obvious on a reread when all the tributes are taken to the capital that they're actually being taken to where we are. They're all disgusted by how hairy Katniss is, and there's like some graphic discussions of her waxing process, which I didn't remember was included and loved. And also that she's appalled by their upspeak. Katniss is not a fan of their vocal fry. Why do these people speak in such a high pitch? Why do the ends of their sentences go up as if they're asking a question? Odd vowels, clipped words, always hiss on the letter S. No wonder it's impossible to mimic them. Judgy much, Katniss. But I love that she's never had a shower before. She's obsessed by the lifts. For any Americans watching, that is the, in fact, correct word for an elevator. It's quite sweet. She says, "It's exhilarating and I'm tempted to ask Effie if we can ride in it again, but somehow that seems childish. Can we just go up and down in this building instead of maybe taking part in a horror-filled reality TV show?" Another part that I'd forgotten was that one of their mentors, Effie, comments that she's very impressed that they have table manners and they can eat with a knife and fork because the contestants last year couldn't. Katniss gives her like the most withering stare and then proceeds to eat all of her meal with her hands. So yeah, I'm absolutely tearing through it. And let's be real, there's fuck all else to do, so I think I'll continue. I've been reading. Can we talk a little bit more about my theories about how this book is actually about climate change? Because I have feelings. So, there's 12 districts. Luxury items, masonry, technology, fishing, electricity, transportation, lumber, textiles, grain, livestock, agriculture, and coal mining. And it's well established at the beginning that there is the 13th district, which, a spoiler alert even to myself because I can't completely remember, but we will learn more about District 13. But in popular encouraged fable, District 13 destroyed by the capital in the first rebellion as a warning to all the others, and they still show shots of like a smoking wasteland where District 13 was. Now, according to the books, District 13 used to mine graphite. So graphite is used in technology, right? It's a very finite thing you get from the ground and you make luxury products with it. Now, why is that the least important district? Is it because in the future we run out of it first? Because District 12 does coal, and we know that that would be the second most likely thing to run out in the future. If District 12's whole point is fossil fuels, especially when mining coal is also associated with working class people, what does it mean when Katniss rises as a miner of fossil fuels alongside a boy called Peter? Pete! Whose 2 talents are making things from grain and covering himself in mud. It means, my friends, that this book is a climate change book. And The Hunger Games is a performative aspect of man versus nature because the capital feel like they've already won that battle. So they thrust them into the theatre of forest and nature to perform survival. English degree wanker. Morning. It's 6:08. Trying not to wake Craig. So since we last spoke, I read a little bit more, went on my government mandated walk, spent time with Craig, cooked some pancakes, and then I settled down in bed and I read the rest of book 1. Now, I don't have too many notes at this point, other than how creepy is it that when they're in the Hunger Games, they have to be appealing to sponsors. If they look strong and resilient and like a good bet of a horse, then their mentors negotiate with sponsors and drop parachutes of very expensive resources into the games for them. Now, is this not a parallel for influencers, managers and sponsorship deals? Especially since Katniss has to milk her relationship with Peter to be socially squeaky clean enough to gain the favour of the sponsors. We live and die by social credit. So I thought that was really interesting, and I'm also so thoroughly Team Gale at this point. The thing is, I'm not Team Gale for myself. If the books are as far into the future as I think they are, what you need to be looking for, Katniss, is a man who can make plant-based goods, soft masculinity, a sense of humour in the face of death, someone without too much of a political axe to grind. I feel like in this dystopian world, that is the ideal partner. A boy who likes to walk through the woods and do debate me and slaughter animals. Not ideal. But the reason I'm Team Gale is because she is so clearly Team Gale, and there is just so little affection from her when it comes to Peter that I don't really know how they're going to turn that around. When she has her first kiss with Peter, she comments that it's warm. And I know it's like she's not letting herself love him, but also I'm like, you don't like this man. Red flags, as far as the eye can see. But we continue. So it's 1:10 and I've been doing a little bit of work this morning. I sent out my newsletter and scheduled some posts. I haven't got much read, which I know I know that it's like a fun activity and I should be having fun doing it, and I actually really fucking love it when I'm reading. But right now I just feel really anxious and I don't know why. I just feel really like tight-chested and short of breath. It's not very nice. So I went on a jog that was really beautiful, and then I came in and I thought I'd do a Peter and make some bread. I had the corpses of 2 bananas. Is corpse plural? Corpse? I had the corpse of 2 bananas. I had the 2 dead bananas were in my kitchen, so I thought I'd make banana bread, and I'm excited to eat that, and I think that might relax me a little bit. So I'm going to try and read a bit more and channel my inner Katniss and focus on food. I actually am finding quarantine mainly fine, but I don't know if anybody else experiences this, but I have this feeling a lot of the time that's panic, and it's kind of because I feel like I'm supposed to be somewhere and that I'm late for it. I am still quite actually busy, but I'm not physically busy. I'm not physically leaving the house, so I feel like my brain is like, you have definitely missed something in your diary. You're definitely late for something. You're supposed to be somewhere. Something is wrong. So I don't know if that's where it comes from, but as I'm not an expert and I have a case study of one, I think I'm just going to accept the feeling and eat some cake. Okay, I'm back with a theory and I'm stressed. Pete, Gale, and the girl on fire. Where's water? We're only missing one earth sign. Also, I've realised that this is far into the future, but they don't have any technology, which might explain. Katniss gets her first telephone, which is wired into her house. The Capitol hairdressers are gossiping about lots of stuff, but nobody is mentioning social media. Haymitch is very famous for having won the Hunger Games at some point, but nobody seems to have access to reruns of this footage, not even people in the Capitol, which means no internet, which means definitely no need for District 13. But what does that mean? And where's the water? So today kind of morphed into a write-off. I'll be honest, I kind of just feel like shit. My brain wasn't functioning, so I gave myself a bit of a break, but it's 9 PM and honestly I'm kind of done with the day. And while I didn't read all the pages that I wanted to, and while I didn't have the energy that I wanted to, and it is a Sunday, but the capitalist goblin in my head is I can't believe you only utilised 4 out of the 8 working hours of this Sabbath. Despite all that, I come out victorious, because I worked out what the water is. The water is President Snow. He is the frozen water of the plot. Not vlogging.
I'm so tired.
I am so tired.
I think I'll just go straight to bed.
Red
And then I heard voices in the room next door. I was just like, that fucking influencer. I've been off of Instagram for 3 whole days.
Show us as morally superior as Craig,
on my level.
who no longer uses Instagram and is therefore now a fully fledged philosopher. Exactly. Good morning, so it's now Wednesday and I'm almost finished with Catching Fire. The last couple of days I've just been doing a lot of work and trying to like fit in reading in my lunch hours, like in small moments when I can. Like there's just so much killing in it, there's just so much death, and I'm quite a sensitive sausage. I could only watch like 2 episodes of Stranger Things before I just got upset. I like to take my killing sprees slow and steady so that I don't get overwhelmed. But I'm absolutely fucking loving this. It's just so, and that's another reason I haven't really been vlogging it that much, because I just want to keep reading it. I'm guessing if you've watched up to this point, you don't really care about spoilers, but basically in an unprecedented move, President Snow let both Peter and Katniss survive the Hunger Games in the last book, and with that came the promise of them living a slightly upgraded life back in District 12, and the promise of never having to do it again. But turns out Katniss has become an emblem for rebellion. She's become a symbol for an uprising in various districts, and at first she's not a fan. To be honest, at first she wants to run away, and I think that's what's interesting about this book and why it's actually much more interesting to read thematically than the first one, because the first one is kind of like, okay, we get it, battle royale, Lord of the Flies, somebody has to die. But the second one is a zoom out on what that means long term, because basically in the first one she doesn't really care about politics, and I think that's what's interesting about the books, is it kind of discusses how far you can self-preserve before it becomes systemic. In the first one she doesn't really care for politics, she obviously doesn't approve of what the Capitol do, but she's not like an outspoken person who's like, here's how we should change things. She very much just wants to stay alive, which is why I think she struggles to connect with Peter and Gale and doesn't really know what the fuck is going on with that, because she is in deep trauma. Her dad died in a mining accident, which was really more of a political murder in the same way that I'd say Grenfell was an accident, but systemically it was a government fuck up. She's traumatized from having to kill and be killed by many people in the Hunger Games, and then she comes back and is expected to know who she loves. She's fucking 16. Basically the deal is she has to stay in love with Peter and show that that's the reason she rebelled. Basically she's faced with the decision whether to run away with Gale and preserve herself and potentially try and preserve her family, or stay with the districts, marry Peter, because that's what President Snow has in his little fucked up brain decided is the rules, and either behave or become the accidental spearhead of a nationwide bloody uprising. It's not an easy decision, but she has this moment, like the whole reason she volunteers for the Hunger Games is to keep her sister alive. When she's in the Hunger Games, she realises that she wants to keep Peter alive, and it's really just, she doesn't think about things on a big level. She's like either not a very deep thinker or kind of like sitting with deep PTSD, but she is very much up until this point just like, I just want my family to survive, that's all I want. But when she goes into the Hunger Games, she realises that she's unable to keep that care for other people on a local level. Like she starts to care about Rue, who's from a different district. She starts to really feel sorry for a lot of the contestants, and she realises she can't limit her empathy to her bloodline. A lesson we could all do with learning. And she kind of like doesn't really know who she is, because she's like, I kind of think I'm quite a shit person because I only want to save the people that I know. And maybe I only tried to save Peter so that I could save myself. And then she says, the berries. I realise the answer to who I am lies in a handful of poison fruit. If you remember at the end of the last book, she kind of did an unintentional standoff with the Capitol, where she was like, we're gonna pull a Romeo and Juliet if you don't let fucking both of us live, and then everyone's gonna be really mad because there'll be no victor. They do it by threatening to eat these poison berries at the same time. I realise the answer to who I am lies in a handful of poisonous berries. If I held them out to save Peter because I knew he would be shunned if I came back without him, then I am despicable. If I held them out because I loved him, I am still self-centered, although forgivable. But if I held them out to defy the Capitol, I'm someone of worth. The trouble is, I don't know exactly what's going on inside me at the moment. Could it be the people in the districts are right? That it was an act of rebellion, even if it was an unconscious one? Because deep down, I must know it isn't enough to keep myself or my family or my friends alive by running away. Even if I could, it wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't stop people from being hurt the way Gale was today. Life in District 12 isn't really so different from life in the arena. At some point you have to stop running and turn around and face whoever wants you dead. Which I like, because it's less of a hope, it's galvanizing, but it's less of a hopeful thing to like live, laugh, love. Sometimes you've just got to live your dreams. Sometimes you've just got to believe in yourself and become a hero. It's like, no, sometimes you just have to turn around and face who wants you dead. Stressful because they're back in the Hunger Games, which I kind of like remembered happened, and I was like, oh, that is kind of like, this is kind of a cheap shot, it's kind of a gimmick to like put them back in the Hunger Games, like kind of how lazy. But actually it does make a lot of sense, and they've put so many, like, there's so many twists in it that it actually makes it kind of interesting, and it kind of like explores the various aspects of what it means to be in the games, and I'm not mad about it. Maybe I'm just in a really great mood about these books, but I'm like, I thought that was an annoying gimmick of the second book, but it's actually quite interesting. And also they don't actually go into the games until about 300 pages in, so you're actually only really in the games for I think about 100 pages. So I think I forgive it for that as well. That's what's, it kind of reminded me that they're better than I remembered. I took a brief Hunger Games holiday. I was reading, watching and reviewing Normal People book versus Normal People TV show, which is very important. And I also just was almost relieved because I felt like my heart needed a little bit of a break. I didn't really feel much at the end of the last book, not because it wasn't good, but because it was so clearly written as part of Mockingjay. Like, the first book was kind of written as a standalone and could have gone on, whereas obviously like the second and third one were written with the consciousness that it would be a trilogy. So you realise at the end of the second Hunger Games that all of the other contestants are trying to keep Katniss and Peter safe. They're trying to die so that they will live and hopefully start the revolution. And the end of the last book ends with the whole arena kind of falling apart, the games ending, and Katniss being lifted by a helicopter that she thinks is a Capitol helicopter, but actually turns out is Hamish and the rebels and Gale, and they have rescued her. But they fucked up, and they left Peter behind, and the Capitol have him now. And that's where we are when we start Mockingjay. So she's kind of realised that District 13 are also kind of like little shits. Maybe not, but it's not a socialist ideal world led by Corbyn where everybody's happy. But this is the most Katniss phrase I've ever heard. Still, I hate them. But of course, I hate almost everybody now. Myself more than anyone. Classic Katniss. Good morning, hi, hello. Yes, these are my pyjamas. Yes, sometimes I do sleep, like I'm the press assistant for ABBA. I'm on page 125, and at the moment she's in District 13. As we found out, they're much more set on winning than they are on like world peace. Which, fair enough, they've been oppressed for like hundreds of years. But basically now she's the press girl for the other side, and she's not a fan of it, but again, she's doing the interpersonal thing and just trying to keep everybody alive. I remember this part, but I do kind of wish that it was more like The Host, in that it was about like a society that was trying to be utopian. It's so much more truthful, I guess, to write it like this, but it's just so hard. You can't root for a side because both of them are totalitarian regimes. But I guess fight fire with fire. I see the logic. I don't agree with the logic, but I see the logic. through the third one at the moment. For anyone who hasn't read it, is like essentially it's a war book. It's fully in catch-22 military grade war book. Now, nothing wrong with that per se. It's just quite overwhelming to read about all at once, and it's also just like a book that doesn't rest. There's no interlude, there's like, characters, let's reflect on what's just happened to us, or relationship development between any of the characters really. There's just no time, there's too many bombs. So while it was like kind of always heading this way, I do think that I'm like enjoying this one the least. And I do just think while the stakes are like factually higher, it feels like all the characters have already lost so much and are all so numb that it's hard to feel the stakes are higher. Does that make any sense? Also, let's note that both Gale, I think, and Peter have lost their entire families, and Katniss, bless her, been through a lot, but hasn't actually lost anybody she loved at the beginning of the book, Gale, her mum, or her sister. So you can forgive the boys for both being a little bit more on the extreme ends of reactions. It's really interesting watching Gale transform into much more of like the dangerous side of a freedom fighter, seeing all the logics of why his character would morph into that. When it comes to war strategy, Gale has become very into, we need to minimize total deaths, and if that means purposely killing some people, that's fine. Whereas Katniss is a bit like, we really shouldn't be doing that. Katniss is trying to lead a violent uprising whilst also being very indignant when people don't automatically think she's a pacifist. Teenagers, eh? She does make a good point though when she talks directly to Gale about how he's purposely decided to blow up this place and shoot down all these hover planes from District 2. He's like, if we take down the hover planes, we prevent further attack. And Katniss says, but with that kind of thinking, you could turn it into an argument for killing anyone at any time. You could justify sending kids into the Hunger Games to prevent the districts from getting out of line. Also, did you know that Panem is actually short for Panem det Circenses, which Plutarch explains is in a language called Latin about a place called Rome. So some people still do know ancient history. Panem de Circenses translates to bread and circuses. The writer was saying that in the return for full bellies and entertainment, his people had given up their political responsibilities and therefore their power. And then Katniss has this revelation. So that's what the districts are for, to provide bread and circuses. And you think about the present day application of that, like the actual regions of the world that exist to provide bread and circuses for us, and how fucked up that is. And you realise that really this book isn't about us identifying with Katniss, who has never been written as likeable, but to recognise ourselves as capital citizens.
The series and I was having such a good time for so long, and then I realised that I wasn't supposed to be having a good time, and Suzanne Collins meant it to be that way. What became clear to me while rereading this series is that this is not a love story. It's not an adventure story. No, it's not even really an activism story. It is a cautionary tale. At the end, Katniss isn't happy. She's alive, she lives her life with Peter, she even has children. But the point I took away from the end of the book is that nobody wins war. I had forgotten so much of what happened at the end of that book, and I think it's going to be so key to how I understand the next one and what I expect from it. So I'm going to briefly run you through what happens if, like me, you have a head like a colander. The rebels win. However, in the process, Katniss' sister, Prue, who, by the way, started this whole shit by being picked for the Hunger Games, and that's why Katniss volunteered, and that's why the whole thing, that's the catalyst for all of the trilogy. Prue is killed by a bomb that Gale has designed, and it's a really fucked up way the bomb is designed. But anyway, it's not just that Gale was designing bombs, it's that he was designing bombs that would definitely kill children. The rebels win, Katniss ends up with Peter because not going to date a boy who killed her sister, but also potentially more deeply not going to date a boy who believes in winning a war at all costs, which I think is the right decision. however good that jawline is. However, what I'd forgotten about the books, and actually what makes sense of them all, is the final 50 pages. The war is won. The president of rebellious District 13, President Coin, is now the president of the whole country. She's agreed to execute President Snow and let Katniss do it publicly as a symbol of the girl on fire, killing the old ways. But the other big suggestion is whether they kill a lot of the people of the capital who are left because in President Coin's eyes they can't be trusted and they're not capable of change and they really believed in the ideas of the capital. Or you put them all in the Hunger Games together and let them kill each other. Let's have another Hunger Games. It would be brilliant. What revenge? It goes to a vote between the victors and the head honchos of the new government. Peter votes no. Katniss votes yes. And you think this main character has resigned herself to the brutalities of war. She doesn't believe in the fundamental improvement of humanity. I guess by voting that way, she's trying to save at least one person, whoever wins the Hunger Games, rather than killing everybody. She really is who she is at the beginning of the books, which is somebody who just wants to protect their own, just wants to survive, and has been through so much trauma and poverty that she doesn't really have room in her head for political ideals. But the last thing this girl does is when she stands up on the podium to kill President Snow, and she's got her arrow and she's like gonna kill President Snow, and President Coin is standing behind him like, kill him, this is a great moment of history. She flicks her bow up and kills President Coin. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but like, fucking hell. And because she does that, and Coin was the main person who wanted to have another Hunger Games and continue the cycle of horrific, violent showmanship, the Hunger Games doesn't happen ever again. A new government is formed. It's not clear how much better it is, to be honest, but Katniss does get to return to District 12, marry Peter, have some kids, but it's very clear at the end of the last book that she isn't a happy person. War doesn't work for anyone. And that's why I think this book is not, as many would believe, a love story. No. War doesn't work for the people who die. It doesn't even work for the people who live. The mental scars are indelible and never come out. And just because you unify with people against a common enemy doesn't mean that when that enemy is defeated, you will agree on how the world should be. Because I think the big problem with District 13 is that it was literally just existing in a binary to the capital. It's just like, we just don't like what the capital are doing. Is this a lesson for the left? Because I feel like I sit in this group of people that are against things like capitalism and people being excessively rich and a Tory government, but we rarely talk about what we actually do want and what we would replace it with and how practical that would be. But why the end of the book made me really look forward to the new book coming out is because the new book is told from President Snow's perspective, and instead of watching Katniss rub lips with two hot boys and not really feel very much for either of them in the end, and just that warmth, we get to watch President Snow be a mentor in one of the early Hunger Games, and then his rise to power is my impression from what has been released so far. One of the things the rebels are fighting against is the Hunger Games, which is the sacrificial use of children to scare huge amounts of populations into subservience, right? The question of Gale killing Prue asks the question, as the whole series I think does, is the best way to defeat your enemies slightly having to become like your enemies to win, as Gale did because he sacrificed children. So the new book maybe will talk about whether President Snow was one of those people. Was President Snow a Gale? Did he used to want to change things and then realise that he had to become like the people he hated to be able to be in power? Was the thing before that maybe he was a climate change activist? Oh my god! President Snow was a Greenpeace activist, and then the world fell apart and he became evil. Theories. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Are you going to be reading the new Hunger Games book that is coming out on the 19th of May? I will be, and I will probably document it on this channel. Would you enjoy that? These videos are completely free to access and watch, but if you'd like to be part of the merry band of Gumptioners making these videos possible, you can look into joining the Gumption Club below. The Gumptioners have already seen this video, and not just this video, but they've already seen next week's video too. That's for as little as $1 per thing, or even $1 per month if you want to cap it. However, if you have no dollars, but you would like some more stuff, you can also subscribe to my newsletter. When you subscribe, you get a free downloadable list of my top 20 books of all time to read before you die. Actually, I think the official title is To Read Before You Die, or The Planet Dies. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and may the odds be ever in your favour. Do, 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 do.